Greetings, Tech Intersect listeners. This is Stephanie Renee with a brief special announcement. It has been my distinct honor and pleasure to have taken the Tech Intersect journey with you from its humble beginning and watch it grow through 120 plus episodes into a critically acclaimed and world-renowned web series. But my professional responsibilities will not allow me to continue to serve as the show producer. Dr. Evans and I have been friends and sorors for decades, so I wish her much continued success on the road ahead. And if you have learned even a fingernail's worth of the amazing information she provides, then run out and tell all of your friends to hear what they've been missing. As she often tells us in the show outros, let's go and let's grow. For this week's Spotlight, we present what originally aired as episode 47 with guest Michael Casey, Bitcoin and Money Reimagined from Wall Street to Washington, D.C. I look forward to partying with you all in the winner's circle.
Welcome to Tech Intersect. I'm your host, Tanya Evans, and my life and work exist at the heart of law, business, and technology. Yeah, I've earned a few fancy titles and degrees over the years, but the bottom line is I'm a writer, speaker, teacher, and lifelong learner, and I'm really excited that you've joined me on this journey. So what is Tech Intersect? Well, it's authentic, empowering conversations with really interesting guests who demystify complex topics to prepare you for the future. Because your future is now. And it exists where law, business, and tech intersect. Get ready to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. In this episode of Tech Intersect, I chat with Michael J. Casey, CoinDesk's Chief Content Officer who previously served as CEO of Streambed Media. It's a company he co-founded to develop provenance data for digital content. He was also a senior advisor at MIT Media Lab's Digital Currency Initiative and a senior lecturer at MIT Sloan School of Management. Prior to joining MIT, Michael spent 18 years at the Wall Street Journal, where his last position was to serve as senior columnist covering global economic affairs. Casey has authored 5 books, including 2 of my favorites because they are specifically about the crypto community and blockchain. The first is The Age of Cryptocurrency, How Bitcoin and Digital Money Are Challenging the Global Economic Order. Yes, that's one title. And The Truth Machine, The Blockchain and the Future of Everything, both co-authored with Paul Vigna. I invited Michael on to talk about 2 really hot topics in the world of cryptocurrency. The first is the big money of Wall Street taking a more favorable view of crypto and looking to get in the game, and what that means in terms of the impact on Bitcoin and the crypto ecosystem. And also the Stable Act, introduced by Representative Rashida Tlaib of the House Financial Services Committee. So it's time to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. Michael Casey is the Chief Content Officer of CoinDesk and the non-executive chairman of Streambed Media, a blockchain-based media tech company that he founded during his prior role as senior advisor at MIT Media Lab's Digital Currency Initiative. Michael writes CoinDesk's weekly Money Reimagined newsletter and co-hosts a podcast of the same name with another one of my favorite people in the space, Sheila Warren of WEF, or the World Economic Forum. Michael is the author of 5 books, 2 that I actually use in my course, my Blockchain, Cryptocurrency, and Law course. It is listed as definitely something to read, and I have enjoyed them to be sure. Both of those were co-authored with his former Wall Street Journal colleague, Paul Vigna. He's also, both Paul and especially Michael, one of my favorite people in the space. He's always been so generous with his time and his talents in the crypto ecosystem, and today is certainly no exception as he shares his time with us today on the Tech Intersect podcast. We will talk about all of the things that he's working on, including some of his most recent articles. More on that in a moment, but first, Michael, welcome.
Hi, Tanya. Thank you for that very, very warm introduction. I'm really thrilled to be here. I think we've been talking about doing this for some time, so it's great to be here. And all of that sentiment equally shared in the other direction. You're one of my favorite people in this space. Keep doing what you do.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So before we jump in, I want to just check in with you. 2020 has been all the things. We don't even have to list all the things and all the ways that regardless of one's stage, age, station in life, that it's impacting people in a variety of ways. So how have you been doing in the midst of the pandemic, personally, professionally? How are you?
Well, we're surviving. I live in the suburbs of Westchester in a town called Pelham, just outside the city. And I used to live in the city and in New York, and I love the city, and I had certain regrets about moving to the burbs. I grew up in a suburban city in Australia, and so I felt like I had to, my place was a big city. But I can tell you this year, Tanya, when I realized that I could, get outside, walk the dog, and have a bit of space and fresh air in a place, I was very grateful for the fact that I lived in this, it's a leafy, nice suburb. So things aren't too bad. We just hang it out here and spend a lot of time, as I'm sure everybody does, in front of my computer. We're a full work from home operation. CoinDesk is somehow, we're doing okay. I mean, financially, the bottom line is, as you know, the crypto industry is alive and well, and so as a result, so is CoinDesk. And even though we had to cancel Consensus, the big event of the year, let me rephrase: we definitely did not cancel. We canceled the in-person event, but we actually had a very big virtual version of that, and we'll be doing it again next year. Other than those relatively big disruptions, we've sort of gone on with things. We're still expanding and doing all sorts of things. So I'm pretty thankful. I've had it good. There are a lot of things that could be worse. I can't go home to see my family in Australia, which upsets me. But other than that, things are pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well. It was, at the beginning of this pandemic, I was serving as the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at the University of New Hampshire School of Law. And as challenging as that position is, because it's always tough when you're middle management, right? You're managing up, sideways, and down, and you're the least favorite person in the room. But that's okay. I have a skill set where you keep your head down and you get it done. What I never saw coming, because none of us did, is to have to pivot on a dime and help to transition 40 plus faculty and adjuncts and administration in some sense into a virtual reality. Well, no pun intended, but to move everything virtually in a very short period of time, and making sure that as a matter of academic affairs, that our students were getting the support and everything that we needed. And, certainly my colleagues. So that was challenging because COVID was hitting very close to home very early on. I'm fortunate enough to not have lost any of my nuclear family, but I know numerous people who have passed away in a very short period of time. And I was always like 1 degree removed from them, and it frightened us early and often. So I am an only child and my own best friend. So I was built for the pandemic life. So once I feel safe, but it was very frightening in the beginning, and then losing people and the uncertainty. Absolutely. Fast forward to where I am now, I'm in a new position at Dickinson Law.
Congratulations, by the way. You had some new
Thank you.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Yes. So I'm ending better than I started, for sure. And I feel very grateful to stare at this computer all day and do what I love to do, like you. So I'm happy about that for sure. But thank you for asking. And so speaking of working from home and all that you're working on with CoinDesk in particular, I know that you have this column, Money Reimagined, the series. And I'm, as I mentioned before, our formal remarks, how much I'm enjoying it. And you have captured, perhaps this is your intention, if not, just to let you know why it's resonating with me, because I know how difficult it is to distill these complex topics in a way that's accessible, meaningful, relevant, and still, leading edge, and still caters to a community that is very tech savvy. But you find a way to capture both the close and the wide view of these complexities. And so that's great. And you're a wonderful writer. I enjoy your writing as well. Writing doesn't always translate well from books to, a column, a very tight column. So you do that as well. So first, explain to the listeners where the idea for Money Reimagined, I think of it as the future of money, where the idea came from and why you found that to be the most relevant focus for your writing.
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
Yeah, well, thank you for all of that. I'm glad that it resonates in the way that you described, because that's indeed the point, to try to give people something accessible and they can understand the why, really. I think that's probably where my focus often is like, why does it matter? I mean, what is it that's really sort of important about this technology? And if that's really it, it's like I once I started writing about Bitcoin, back in 2013, you first grapple with this, like, why is this, what does this thing even exist? What is it all about? And because we had these preconceived ideas of what money is, right? We have this deeply ingrained idea. It goes back. And you don't ask any questions, right? It's just, as Yuval Harari says, it's the greatest story ever told, right? There's no intrinsic value to a dollar note or for that matter, to a gold ingot. It's what we collectively imbue it with. And so it's already an imagined concept, right? And so once you start like, okay, why Bitcoin? What is it? And you realize that just makes you start questioning what money is. and you go down that rabbit hole. And then you kind of end up realizing that this is something that goes a long way back. It really starts with, the early stages of writing. The first ledgers were actually the first forms of writing, cuneiform writing in Mesopotamia. And out of that emerged concepts of this collective value exchange system, which is what money is. Mm-hmm. So when you sort of look at what, Bitcoin and all of the spin-off technologies that come from that represent, they challenge some of these really core ideas, right? So one of them is the idea that there is this single kind of external store of value that people historically have valued, which is gold, right? We've got the gold standard, and beyond that, it's just whether or not you believe that money should be pegged to gold or not. It's always been there as this deeply culturally ingrained representation of some sort of external, depoliticized source of value, right? It's not something that a king or a central banker or anybody else, for that matter, can manipulate. And then you start to say, well, now we live in this digital economy and we need this digital version of that. There's this digital scarcity concept. You start to realize how much of a profound change that is. That's 7,000 years worth of value that's been built and cultural value that's been imbued into something like gold is now challenged by this technology. In the same way that, I think centralized ledger keeping. So if you go back to the Medici in the late 15th century, they were the ones who introduced double entry bookkeeping. They didn't invent that. That's actually an Arabic invention. But they introduced it for the first time into banking, which then meant that we created essentially the framework around which banking would be inserted into the entire payments and monetary world, because you had this ledger but that was taking account of debits and credits on either side, and ultimately therefore able to intermediate people's exchanges, which is pretty much what we have now, right? It's what we've been doing for 500 years. That's now being challenged, right? So, I mean, this is it. I mean, we're at a turning point, and I just think it's important to step back and discuss that. Nothing, if anything is going to disrupt our economy, it is the disruption of something like that, right? This isn't just Blockbuster being, disrupted by Netflix, right? This is money being disrupted. So, it's a profound moment, and I just think the word reimagined captures it, because, as I said, it's like it's already an imagined idea, so there's nothing wrong with that. That's
Mm-hmm.
point is that's how we, by collectively imagining something, we give it value. We tell stories, we build these narratives around it, and that's how we come to believe in it. Once we all believe in it, we can do something with it. That's the same as nation states, religion, everything. So
Right.
here we are reimagining money. I think it's just there's a lot to be done with that. It's a big deal.
No question. And you're so right that once, you start talking about crypto and all of the conversations, the countless conversations I know that you've had, with family and friends, let alone with any new entrant into the space, is getting underneath, as you said, to the more fundamental appreciation of what money is and what value is, how it's represented. And because we're making it up, this a collective agreement, right? Not always backed or tied to something in particular that we can see, feel, touch, and carry. But this representation of it, then having this opportunity, really as a matter of a customer service issue at this point, is there a better way, or at least an alternative means to engage in transactions of value in a way that has, a democratizing little d impact on the way that people interact with value. So I love that. And thank you. That's a really great way to tee this up, especially because when I think of the different ways that people come into this space, for many years, when you think back to Bitcoin and the view from legacy financial systems that it's completely and purely fringe, and that's fine. We're in a different place now, it seems, where we've moved from quote unquote fringe, nothing to see here, move on, only drug money, et cetera, a really meaningful dialogue around the potential impact and benefits. And, as a lawyer and a professor, I always talk about the potential drawbacks and implications, but that is never to detract from the power and the promise. And so now I'm thinking about where we are today at the end of 2020. We're sitting down at the end of the year to talk about this. One of your recent articles in this series focuses on, and I want to get the title correct, Bitcoin's tug of war as Wall Street moves in. And at the beginning, so talk to us about why this topic is important now. It is set, of course, in the stage of, or cast in the light of the price movement of Bitcoin, for example. 3 years ago, we had the march toward 20K equivalent. Just off of that now, I'm looking at the price now, or like 19.5 in USD equivalent. So people are still having that price conversation. But I believe, and I think you agree, that this time it's different. And it's precisely because of what you've just written about. When Wall Street takes notice and all the money that's been sitting outside starts to want to have some exposure in crypto generally, perhaps Bitcoin specifically. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is very different from 2017, the rally we saw back then, because of mainly just the story that's associated with it, right? The explanations that are given are very much associated with these larger institutions and sort of prominent investors basically parroting out the argument that a lot of hardcore believers in Bitcoin's promise have made for a long time. So there's a kind of vindication to it, right? So we're talking about, like a senior analyst at Citibank. We've got Fidelity putting out reports. We've got Mass Mutual saying they were buying into Bitcoin. You've had even BlackRock's CEO, Larry Fink. Like BlackRock's the biggest fund manager in the world, talking up the idea that Bitcoin is a legitimately important potential store of value in this digital age. So that's part of the story. The other part of the story, of course, is a great deal of uncertainty around the future of the global economy as we come out of this, horrendous year. And there'll have to be a price. There'll have to be a piper that's paid for this. There'll be debts that will be racked up everywhere. There are being racked up everywhere. We're just kind of in this kind of weird suspended state right now. But eventually those debts will come due. And when they do, there's a real concern that there's a reckoning with currencies in particular, because that's how nations will essentially pay their way out of debt traditionally, is to devalue your currency. But we can't all do that at once, right? So is there a collective devaluation, common one? Everyone does it together, which means they just print a lot of money, which of course means the money's got to go somewhere, which means that's why people are talking about things like the need for a state store of value and Bitcoin as this, digital version of gold that is therefore much more relevant to a digital economy. We've moved out of an analog economy, digital economy, all of that. So that's the big story that's going on. But once the institutions come in, right, then they demand things, right? They literally can't buy Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin. They have to be custodied by somebody else. And so there has to be rules around custody, and there has to be, which involves KYC, your customer rules and things like that. And so they're actually coming in and demanding regulation and pushing for this stuff, which of course runs somewhat antithetical to the core ethos that led to Bitcoin in the first place, right? We're talking about the cypherpunks, the original imaginers of this idea, who really basically said, let's remove identity from the process. The way to create a true peer-to-peer system is one where I don't need to verify who you are. I don't need to have anybody in the middle creating this gatekeeper role, deciding who or shouldn't transact. I need the way to do it is create a decentralized ledger keeping system that allows us to keep track of those records collectively without necessarily identifying individuals. So you've got this intense clash there in terms of the ethos. And that's really what I was getting at. And just asking the question, can they coexist? Is there a world in which we still get towards this dream? Because the dream of that cryptocurrency, so that cypherpunk ethos, is really one of inclusion, right? For people like me, I sort of spend a lot of my time in Argentina in the developing world. So I've always been really interested in how innovation could help these countries leapfrog the institutional problems they have in terms of their money and financial access. And therefore this technology is really valuable. But if we burden it with heavy KYC and all this sort of onboarding problem, we end up just sort of, maintaining the incumbent system and not getting there, right? So that's where the challenge is as far as I'm concerned. I actually do think there's a pathway in which the two coincide, but unfortunately it means if you do think institutional money is unavoidably coming in, I think it puts off for some time that sort of more utopian, everybody's included kind of world, because we have to pass through this phase first.
If you're an engineer or a scientist, you love Formula One, you love cycling, you love learning about how new technologies are changing the world around us, then I thought you may want to listen into my new podcast, the Neil Ashton Podcast. We talk to leading engineers and scientists from around the world, hear about their life stories, hear about new technologies, and hopefully educate you and give you a better sense of how key things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, supercomputing are changing the world around us. If that sounds like it's something you might like, you should come and have a listen.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of Tech Intersect. Our conversation will continue in a moment, but first, a word on an exciting opportunity.
There's a more cost-effective and time-efficient way to reach your leading-edge learning and earning goals, to put you ahead of the stiff competition in this fast-paced, tech-driven economy. You need skills, credentials, and a fast track to a competitive advantage. You need it now more than ever, and I can help. The Advantage Evans method puts you ahead of the curve with condensed, comprehensive online courses, curated content to leverage your current skills and expertise, live coaching, networking opportunities, and more. Upcoming courses include From Cash to Crypto to help you buy your first Bitcoin, and there are 2 ways to get your advantage. Advantage Evans Encore gives you maximum experience for your total competitive advantage and access for 1 year. It includes a live welcome and modules on terminology, buying and selling, exchanges, mining, earning crypto, trading and investing, and also several of the legal issues you need to know in order to be safe and secure as you enter this space. That includes tax compliance, how to plan for a Bitcoin estate, and securities laws to make sure you avoid any legal unforced errors. Now, Advantage Core gives you the essentials. It's a short course to give you what you want and the support you need to buy your first crypto in as little as 3 weeks, with access to the information and replays for 3 months. And if you're not quite ready for your Advantage and want a sneak peek to try before you buy, then register for a free masterclass where I share my Crypto 101 success checklist and cover current hot topics in crypto. So there truly is something for everyone, including you, to get in on the fast track and learn and earn in the digital economy. Visit AdvantageEvans.com to get started. That's AdvantageEvans.com.
And now, back to the conversation.
And it's that phase and legacy systems that have traditionally locked people out of the meaningful participation, except in the higher upper echelons of finance. That's the entire problem.
Yeah.
And so that is always, my concern. And so my hope is some peaceful coexistence. I don't know, given where we are right now and given what you've described, if it's possible. I know you had a conversation with Jill Carlson and someone else.
Raoul Powell, who's
Yes.
the CEO of Real Vision, but he's also a prominent, global macro investor.
No, go ahead. Yeah. What were their thoughts? I know that they're thought leaders in the space.
We deliberately got them on together because that we knew that there would be some difference there.
Right.
Raoul had made a bit of a stir on Twitter by saying, the institutions are coming and therefore we need to have regulation to support them. So, and that will be a good thing because once the institutions are in, you'll all get rich. And so, stop your complaining. And he got a lot of pushback from, crypto and others who, really think differently about these things. And he just still maintains the position. He says basically, until Bitcoin, let's put aside stable coins and, all the other technology out there. But for Bitcoin itself, before Bitcoin can become an instrument in and of itself that functions as money or that functions as, an accessible instrument for sort of smaller payments and smaller holdings, it needs to be accepted and have this big network effect. And the network effect is really not just people, it's money. The money needs to come into it. He says the institutions will come in, they build this thing out, it sort of attains this high level of acceptance as this, the new digital gold, if you like. And when it finally gets there, then we start building things on top of it. And the interesting thing is, I actually think this is quite possible that we will get there. And then, ultimately Bitcoin functions, I think, particularly as a source of collateral because it is something that I can now borrow against or lend against, right? And it has this powerful sort of capacity once you incorporate it with other smart contract services to build automatically executed collateral function. So the ability then to feed that into DeFi and everything else starts to look interesting. Where now we start to build a system that disintermediates the big players because those big players have given us the core value of this Bitcoin in the first place. It's a nice thesis, right? But whether or not that's guaranteed, or whether all you end up doing is just creating opportunities for those institutions to come in and shut out everybody else, because that's what permissioned power does. That's the open question.
Right.
And Jill was just saying, look, yes, the good news is you still can't shut down Bitcoin itself. The protocol is one step removed from that capacity to regulate it. So that gives us base layer is still something you can build upon. But the reality is that the services that keep getting built on top of that keep on getting KYC'd and shut down. To use the example of local Bitcoins, which used to be a really, very free, easy way for people to move in and out of Bitcoin in places like Venezuela, it now has KYC involved. So you keep on shutting down these entry points for the poor. And, there's really no guarantee that they'll suddenly be able to get in somewhere else. Although, that it is, there's Lightning Network, which essentially is a non-KYC system. And if that really does work, then that's a way in which we get to some of these solutions. But it's naive to think you can just... these regulations don't matter. They will inherently impede people's access, and so we need to think hard about what kinds of regulations we truly do want, and what carve outs there can be for innovations built to boost financial inclusion.
Yes, well, that debate will absolutely continue. And as long as we're talking about it, that means there's the opportunity for strategizing and 1 year, 5 year, 10 years from now to be in a different place and space, because that informed debate is what yields forth the best results. I see we have about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to touch on a related topic. We put stablecoins aside for the purposes of the discussion that we just had, but recently, as you know, with the introduction of the Stable Act coming out of Representative Rashida Tlaib's office, two co-signatories as well, but a different author of the bill. And immediately when it hit, it sparked intense debate. I don't often debate, particularly on my own Twitter feed. My Twitter feed is my own home. If I invite you there, we'll talk about what I want to talk about. Otherwise, you can talk about it on your own timeline. But this was a particular import given the impact. And I certainly did not intend for my remarks to go not viral, but let's say viral with a little V, because people are still engaging with it. I had to shut it down so I could go on with my life. But I care very intensely about this, and not just in my capacity as chairwoman of the Maker Foundation, but as an academic, as an attorney, as a Black woman in the world who believes very much in supporting the traditionally underestimated, those who are unbanked, underbanked, women around the world to be able to participate and to do so meaningfully. I believe very strongly in protecting investors and consumers, but I also believe very much, obviously, in this technology and in the potential for crypto assets to really change lives. And so that's why I'm so passionate about it from a number of reasons. For those who don't know, and I'll drop some additional information in the show notes, the Stable Act was, according to those who support it, written with the intent to prevent abuse and the potential rise of a stablecoin-based shadow banking system, as best as I can understand it. And I, again, will go through the points. Basically, any stable coin issuer would need to obtain a federal banking charter. They would have to be in full compliance and fulfillment of existing banking regulations. Stablecoin issuers would be required to obtain approval of both the Federal Reserve and the FDIC, or the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And the issuers themselves would either need to obtain FDIC insurance or deposit, as I understand it, $1-for-$1 reserves directly at the Federal Reserve. And you have some thoughts about this as well. And I'm hoping that you'll share them and we can talk a bit about what the future of that may be.
Yeah, look, first of all, very glad that you spoke up, because I think you came at it from the right place, which is I do believe. I mean, I'm generally an optimist, and I'm not so cynical as some people in the space, and so I genuinely believe that this was well intended. I think there is not, the classic response to crypto is, no, there's a hidden agenda. This is all about trying to sort of reinforce the existing incumbents. I do not think that Rashida Tlaib is in the pay of Wall Street, right? But ultimately, what bothers me most about these things is the unintended consequences of literally, essentially supporting Wall Street, because it is an expensive exercise for any startup to get compliant with this multitude of regulatory requirements. And getting a federal banking charter or any banking charter is a very, very costly, time-consuming exercise. So, the regulators will say, well, tough luck, you have to do that. The problem is, it is such a barrier that it is a barrier to entry. Like, it's just, the cost of becoming compliant, if in and of itself it prevents startups who have other mechanisms for basically protecting consumers, and there are other mechanisms for being transparent, and there are ways in which these things can be audited. All of that can be brought to bear to bring a level of security that's required at a much lower cost than jumping through all these legal hoops to get compliant. If that's the case, then all you're doing is propping up the existing players, which is the problem. I mean, we 2008, the one, those 4 letters, TBTF, is the too big to fail, is the defining problem of our age. The very reason why we are going through this massive crisis right now. Right? This pandemic would have been so much easier to handle if we hadn't had a financial crisis back in 2008, and we hadn't done so much harm to the functioning of our financial system. And that harm was the direct result of the too big to fail functionality of a banking system that is way too powerful. I mean, I believe so strongly about this. This is, wrote a book called The Unfair Trade about this. And I find it really distressing that people come back thinking that they are protecting people, building laws that are just going to reinforce that system. The same people who I think legitimately criticize Wall Street heavily are just regulations that will end up supporting them. And I don't think they see it. They just see regulation as the solution. They don't see that regulation is a cost, and it's an impediment to innovation, which is an impediment to inclusion. And I think that's what's so. I mean, there's of course this idea as well that particularly for these fully, decentralized versions of stable coins, that who or what is going to actually apply for this charge, right?
Right.
And the authors of the bill say, well, there are certain, real players within, say, the Ethereum Foundation who are really calling the shots, and that we can debate that, and that certainly I don't think you're going to fight with the Ethereum community. There may well be cases where you could say, yeah, look at the case where they have rolled back and done hard forks and so forth. So there is a certain amount of control. That still doesn't. I'm not quite sure how you still then go about the exercise of having X number of validator nodes apply collectively for a banking license. I mean, the sheer impracticality of it. And therefore, the intent is to punish software, is to just treat software as if it's a company, which really goes against the ethos of innovation and in fact, some would argue free speech, right? Because code.
Absolutely.
So there's a whole lot of really problematic aspects to this, and it just doesn't feel like it was well thought out. Although I've heard the author stridently make his case.
Stridently, yes, that is the understatement of 2020, and that's saying something. As I think about, I'm looking for all of the members of the Black and Brown community who have suffered so harshly under the stablecoin regime that they need to be freed. Right. Challenge that assumption as well, because it's written and presented under the cloak of, but for this, the Black and Brown communities around, in the United States will suffer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I missed that memo. I was not at that meeting. I did not see that. And
it's not the payday lenders. It's not the,
right.
It's not the exclusionary practices of providers or anything like that. It's actually the stablecoin providers. Yeah, they're the ones who really held everybody back all these years. Yeah.
But for. Yeah. Well, my friend, I could go on forever. I remember we were at an event during Boston Blockchain Week, if I'm not mistaken. There was beer and barbecue involved, and it was like beer, barbecue, and Bitcoin. What could possibly be wrong with that? Yeah. So we could talk for hours, but I'm going to release you lovingly back into.
I miss those times. Yeah. We'll get back together again sometime, Tanya. I promise.
Yes, the outside will open up, and I will hold you to it. I think the world of you, my friend. I'm glad that you spent this time with me.
Thank you.
And anything that you ever need, I am ready, willing, and able to woman this laptop and this microphone for what you need. And before we get out of here, let everybody know where they can learn more about you and your work, and I will share additional information in the show notes.
I've done a bunch of things over the years. I actually do have my own website, michaeljcasey.com, but I mean, that the most important stuff these days is all on CoinDesk, and so just go to CoinDesk.com. That's where you get it all, and you'll find, every Friday my column Money Reimagined comes out, as does the podcast with Sheila. That's where we're doing most of our stuff these days. So let's check it out.
Many, many thanks again to Michael Casey. I hope you enjoyed our conversation about how and why to reimagine our relationship with money, with value, with meaningful participation in the economy, wealth building, and financial autonomy. Satoshi's original concept, expressed in the Bitcoin white paper shared way back in 2008, described Bitcoin as a new electronic cash system that's fully peer-to-peer with no trusted third party. Another essential component was to restore privacy to money, something all but lost in the current digital veneer over the age-old double-entry ledger system maintained by the banking industry and government today. This is precisely why the conversation and controversy about legacy financial players entering the Bitcoin scene and the government's reaction to crypto assets like stablecoins, which are really creating a customer service crisis for big money and big government. It's an interesting time. And so if you, like me, might be wondering, WWSD, what would Satoshi do? Read the Bitcoin white paper, because, my friends, we've been here before. Final housekeeping notes. Please take a moment to like, comment, and share this episode and this podcast with your networks. Follow me on social media and let me know what topics you'd like to hear more of and who you'd like to hear more from. All right, that's all for this episode. Until next time, continue to shine.
stay in touch with host Tanya Evans via your favorite social media. On Twitter at TechIntersect and on Instagram via the handle TechIntersect. This podcast has been produced by Stephanie Renee for Soul Sanctuary Incorporated.